Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chinedu. All right. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us from all over the world. I am Antonia Taiwa Jai, the Human Resource Manager for Sahel Consulting Agriculture and Nutrition Limited. And I am excited to welcome you to the maiden edition of the Sahel Knowledge Series. Now, at Sahel Consulting, we have held several internal knowledge series over the past years, and our team have greatly benefited from this session, so we decided to share them with you. This webinar is a quarterly event that creates an avenue for us to educate everyone about the trends and opportunities for growth and change in the agriculture and nutrition landscape, the role of the seed sector in food system transformation. In a few minutes, I will be welcoming our own executive chair, Ndidi Wuneli, who will set the scene for the reason why we decided to open this webinar to everyone. After which our managing partner, Temi Adegore, will give an insight into Sahel Consulting and what we do. Chinedu Agbara, a senior manager here at Sahel, will be introducing the keynote speaker and also moderating that session. And of course, there will be room for question and answer, but I would advise that you send in your questions early enough in the chat box, and our speaker will answer as many questions as time will permit. In order to have an effective session, please abide by the following housekeeping rules. That you use the expression buttons such as raise your hands, thumbs up, wave to contribute or call for attention. And all attendees will be able to participate in all relevant phases of this event. So kindly use the chat box to contribute and send your questions as well. Kindly refrain from posting anything in the chat that is unrelated to the event. And when you're allowed to speak during the Q&A sessions, we request that you kindly respect the group's time and keep your comments brief and to the point. The Sahel Knowledge Series Organizing Committee are available to provide links and guidance in the chat box. At this point, it is with great pleasure that I invite Ndidi Wuneli to give us an insight into why we decided to open this webinar to everyone. Welcome, Ndidi. Is Ndidi on the call?
I can't see Antonia. I think we'll have to skip Ndidi for now and then maybe move over to Temi, and then at the end we'll come back to Ndidi. Yeah.
I'm not sure Temi is on the call yet, but
I'm on the call.
Temi. Okay, all right.
I was
okay, go ahead, Temi.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear something I couldn't hear anything for a while. Okay, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, welcome, Temi.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Antonia. Please, can you advance the slides? Thank you. Okay, so I would briefly talk about Sahel Consulting, who we have and what we do. We were set up we operate as a management consulting firm. We started in 2010, working to transform Africa's agricultural and nutrition landscape. Our vision is to be recognized as the most trusted consulting partner and point of reference in the African agricultural and nutrition landscape, integral to building effective and efficient value chains and attaining food security. And we have a mission to transform Africa's agricultural and nutrition landscape through the various activities and interventions and innovations that we implement. We work in three broad areas of agriculture, nutrition, and agribusiness, and trying to connect all of these three key areas together. And the several work that we do really directly resonating with some of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals of no poverty, zero hunger, gender equity is a very important aspect of the work that we do. Also decent work for economic growth, responsible consumption, production, climate action, and also partnerships for the goals. We believe a lot in partnerships, collaboration to achieve results. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. Okay, so we categorize our services into 5 broad areas. For the first one is advisory service provision. So we provide a range of advisory services such as market entry and business restructuring strategies for our various clients. We work a lot with both private sector organizations, government agencies, international development organizations, as well as NGOs and civil society organizations to carry out the work that we do. And in all of these programs and interventions and different strategy work, we provide a lot of advisory services. We also have an in-depth knowledge from the agricultural value chains, and we provide in-depth market research across key value chains, leveraging our deep industry knowledge, and also, of course, our network of field consultants across the various countries where we work. We also do a lot of work in policy. We work with governments and international development organizations. Based on the data-driven research that we conduct, we provide policy recommendations to the government across all levels. We implement projects, and we have a number of long-term as well as short-term initiatives that we're currently implementing that I will also talk about. And also, we focus a lot on capacity building. We design and conduct training programs for industry stakeholders in both private sector and public sectors, as well as in CSOs and NGOs, using various innovative tools for capacity development. Go to the next slide. Thank you. The work we do, we believe in 2 broad approaches. The first is a private sector-led initiative. Private sector intervention as impact through collaboration. We believe that to drive sustainability and catalyze the growth of the agricultural sector, we definitely need to explore private sector-led initiatives and support the private sector to actually scale their various activities. Also, we believe in impact through collaboration. We believe that sustainable impact can only be delivered through collaboration with the various stakeholders along the value chain to execute our projects. And there's been lots of conversation around collaborative leadership to develop the African agricultural food system, and that's something that's really resonates with work and is really reflected in the work that we do. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. The next slide is really talking about some of the projects that we're currently implementing. So we implement several high impact interventions across a range of value chains in Africa, and also across a range of themes in collaboration with various partners to basically solve some of the complex issues within the Nigerian agricultural sector, as well as other agricultural sectors and industries in some other parts of Africa. This slide is showing 4 of current long-term initiatives that we implement. The first one is talking about is referring to the Advancing Local Dairy Development in Nigeria program, the AODIN program, which started in 2020 and will end, this current phase will end in 2024. AODIN is basically focused on catalyzing the development of the local dairy landscape in Nigeria. We're working with private sector dairy processors across several states in Nigeria to implement this program. We want to make sure that we are able to work with these processors to build the capacity to be able to supply fresh milk from the local dairy farmers within their various states, and also do that in a very sustainable way. as we're doing that, also ensuring that we improve the livelihood of the smallholder producers. Of course, we're also working under the outreach program, working with the government at both the national and sub-national levels to support the development of a dairy sector that is really backed by policy, and also a sector that helps, a landscape that helps the local players to be able to act and also play well within the space. The second project on this slide is our FMI capacity support project, and this project is basically focused on providing strategic institutional strengthening to the staff of FMAT. So we're targeting staff at certain grade levels and basically developing their capacities to be able to deliver on the policy environment that we all want to see. The third project here is BASICS, building an economically sustainable integrated cassava seed system in Nigeria, which we started in 2020 and in 2025. We're implementing the BASICS project in collaboration with a range of partners under the leadership of the International Institute of Agricultural Research, ITA. BASICS is being implemented in both Nigeria and Tanzania. Sahel Consulting under this project is working with industrial cassava processors to build a capacity to develop seed supply chains that helps them to be able to provide the right cassava stems for how growers to produce and multiply for roots supplied to their factories. The last project is the Collaborative Seed Program, and the Collaborative Seed Program is really focused on building a robust seed sector in Nigeria, which is really commercially driven, also which is very reliable and helps farmers to be able to access quality seed. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. And the next slide is, please go to the next slide. The next slide is basically a slide that shows our various partners, the various partners that we're collaborating with. As I said, we're working with government, we're working with private sector, we're working with leading international development organizations and NGOs. And if you look at this slide, it's not an exhaustive list at all. These are just various organizations cutting across all these various areas that we're currently working with. And I'll pass this presentation on now to the next stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Temi. Chinedu, I think indeed is on the call now.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here and to welcome you all. Thank you, Temi, for that great introduction of Sahel Consulting. And thank you to Chinedu and to Walter and the entire team for putting this together. You know, the amazing thing is that every Friday, Sahel has an initiative called Knowledge Worth Sharing, where within our team, we actually share what we're learning from the field. We share insights, we share best practices, and it's been an amazing journey to just build our team. But late last year, we started saying, you know what, why are we only focused on just sharing this knowledge with ourselves? We should share it with the world. It's so important to transform the agricultural landscape and to ensure that we have cutting edge information, knowledge, and skills. And so this is our first open knowledge sharing that we're inviting friends, colleagues in the ecosystem to join us. And it's such a blessing that you have made the time in your very busy schedules to engage with us. Our hope is that this will be one of many open knowledge sharings, that the Sahel team will share knowledge, we'll bring in experts to share knowledge in the ecosystem, and we'll continue to push forward. So we're all equipped with the skills, tools, insights, and networks that we need to transform the food ecosystem. This is a critical time in our food ecosystem, as you know, with the challenges with climate change, but also the Ukraine-Russia war. And we're seeing food inflation, we're seeing challenges assessing fertilizer, rising costs of seeds and fertilizer. And so this topic is so important as we try to increase the productivity of our farmers and ensure that our people have food. I'm so excited to be with you today, and I join Temi, the leadership of Sahel, Chinedu, and everyone else in welcoming you. And I hope that you have a fantastic experience. Please put the insights you're gaining into the chat Stay connected with us at Sahel, join our mailing list, and please continue to celebrate the good work that we can do together to transform the food ecosystem. So now over to Chinedu.
Thank you very much, Ndidi. Yeah, so good day to everyone, and thank you for making our time to participate in this webinar. My name is Chinedu Abara. I am a senior manager at Sahel Consulting, and I am also the program manager of the Collaborative Seed Program. The Collaborative Seed Program is funded by the government of the Netherlands in partnership, in a partnership with the Nigerian government under the Nigerian-Netherlands Seed Partnership. And CSP is a flagship project in the seed investment portfolio projects being implemented by Sahel. And these projects are all designed to transform the seed sector, ensuring our farmers have access to the very best quality seed of improved varieties that are well adapted to our agroecologies. The seed sector is a topic I'm always excited to talk about. It's something we as an organization has worked on for the last 10 years or thereabout, and I'm excited about the impact we are achieving. We've achieved the potential to even do more to increase the agricultural productivity of our farmers and ensure our farmers can compete with their global peers. Food system transformation is a newer concept, but it has gained a lot more attention in recent times. Last year, there was this very successful United Nations Food Summit, which also had several side events with lots of investment commitment in nutrition and different areas of the food system. But not so much was discussed about the seed sector within that food system transformation framework. And so it's important that donors, development partners, investors, and key actors in the agri-food sector space see the connection between the seed sector and the food system. We think that by people understanding where the seed sector sits in the food system, it will help unlock more investment for the seed sector. So with this, I'm excited to introduce our keynote speaker, who had the privilege of working closely for the last 2 years on seed sector project, Walter De Boef. Walter is the senior advisor with the Wageningen Center for Development Innovation. He has more than 30 years experience in smallholder agriculture. He has worked in more than 40 countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. He is a strategic advisor in seed sector transformation programs in Ethiopia, in Nigeria, in Niger, and Mali. Previously, he led the seed system work at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and facilitated the kickoff of the Lives and Livelihood Funds Agriculture Conference in collaboration with the Islamic Development Bank. Furthermore, he was a visiting professor with the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. He is a co-leader of the team responsible for sector transformation and linking this to the food system, which is the topic we are discussing here. As a scientist, he has co-developed approaches that include integrated framework for sector and food system transformation, integrated seed sector development, and community biodiversity management, on which he has published several books and scientific papers. Recently, Walter was elected as a member in the Municipal Council of the city of Arnhem in the Netherlands for his party, the Green Party. And he will be the spokesperson on topics such as poverty reduction, debt assistance, asylum affairs, and inclusion. I could keep going on with his achievement, which is a lot, but I know he's not too impressed with me reciting all this, but clearly Walter comes highly experienced in the seed sector and the food system transformation, and he has done some pioneering works in these two subject matter. And this makes him to be the perfect person to keynote today's webinar. So while Walter makes his presentation, we're handing over to him shortly. Please be reminded to drop your questions in the chat box. We have colleagues who are compiling these questions, and also feel free to drop feedback. So Walter, over to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chinedu. It's really a pleasure to join you all in this first open seminar by Sahel Consulting. It's really a big honor for me, Nidhi, Temi, Chinedu, that you invited me for this. I feel very privileged. My time learning about Sahel Consulting goes back at the time that I was in Seattle with the Gates Foundation, where everybody always starts very high. And it's really great that in my new position in Wageningen, we have been able to foster a partnership working with in the Netherlands, Nigeria, of the Nigeria-Netherlands Seed Partnership, working on collaborative seed program that we are working together. So thank you very much for inviting me. And I hope I can inspire a lot of the participants, the people who have joined in this Friday afternoon session, to learn a little bit about how the seed sector and in a transformation process of improving and enhancing the vibrance and the professionalization of the seed sector can contribute to food system transformation. Next slide, please. So, opening this presentation, I want to take you back. We are now in May 2022. We want to take you back to May 2020. That was a time when the COVID pandemic, the previous crisis, was really raging, starting to result a lot of insecurity about people's health, but also dealing with a lot of people, the governments taking serious measures in your country and in many other countries with lockdowns and a lot of measures that impacted society. If we zoom in at the seed sector, these lockdown and the different measures taken by government to control the spreading of disease also impacted very much the seed sector. We were at the start of the lockdowns, and we directly saw that farmers planting their seeds, seed companies planting their seed for seed production, traders going with seed to markets, or shipping seed from one store across a state border to another border, inspectors unable to travel to certify the seed in seed producers' fields, and even also meetings of public and private sector making decisions vital for the functioning of the seed sector could not take place because they were forced to have physical meetings, not digital meetings. So directly you saw that a lot of the services and actions required for a small sector as the seed sector compared with other big sectors in food production, but other also this pandemic and the lockdown directly resulted in an impact. Within weeks, there was an impact on the functioning of the seed sector. So that was a time when Sahel, together with National Agricultural Seeds Council, the key body in the country, together with WER, we put our hands together, and in a period of 2 weeks, we developed the seed alert for Nigeria. We did that also as Wageningen with other partners in other countries in Africa and Asia. Why? What we did is really try to identify what was the impact at this moment of the seed sector. Explore what kind of options there are for mitigation. And we did that together with stakeholders. But what we really did also is to ensure and use a methodology that I'll explain, or an approach that I will explain in this seminar. We've made sure that not only we focus on production and marketing, we also addressed governance, coordination, financial transactions, service provision, governance. We address all different aspects of the seed sector to see where are aspects where were bottlenecks that needed to be mitigated. So, and what we also did is explore, okay, if this happens, what will that result in food production and thereby food security? And food security for what crop? With a direct impact on cassava or not, or more crops imported for nutrition. So we made a good assessment, very quick, of the sector and linked it directly to the food system. And we identified really options for mitigation. So what kind of outcomes of this very quick alert were there? We identified critical bottlenecks and came up directly with an action agenda. And to put more force, because everybody was knocking the doors those days of the National Task Force. So we we did not only talk about seed, but we said, okay, if this is not going to function this year in the seed sector, this will have the repercussions for planting by farmers, markets functioning. This will have repercussions for the food system for the coming years. So we put, even seed is only a small portion of Nigerian society, it's very small, but it is linked directly to food security. So we put it directly in that allowed dignitaries like Dr. Ojo from the National Agricultural Seed Counter, the Director General, to really take action and to have conversation to say, okay, maybe seed transport in the country have to continue. Markets for seed at a certain moment in a different way need to function. So in this small example, I want to show you how strong the linkage between the seed sector and the food systems, and in our actions that we undertake and that we undertook with 2 principal partners in Nigeria together with Wageningen University, we were really able to make this link. I want to give you this example up front to make clear in a small exercise that we did how the link can be made. Next slide, please. So what I will do further in this presentation is try to explore with you the link between the seed sector and the food system. In Wageningen, we are operating in many different sectors, in dairy, same like Sahel, but also in horticulture, in many other sectors. And we developed an integrated framework by which sectors, such as the seed sector, are linked with the food system. We will explore that integrated framework. We explore this integrated framework by every time looking for a challenge, same like I did for the COVID-19 pandemic, identify some actions and see what kind of seed sector and food system outcomes. I will zoom in at the seed sector as announced. And in the end, I want to share some lessons on what we, in this context, call transformation, linkages, and also Sahel plays an important role in the investor community in your country and globally, some investment opportunities. Next slide. So this is the framework that we developed in Wageningen. It looks a lot and pretty complicated, I'm sure, but I will try to bring you through quickly to see how our work in the seed sector is shaped and how we shape our actions in order to result in a more vibrant seed sector that meets the demands of a society and agriculture, but also that contributes to much broader food security, dietary, food use, and food access outcomes. In the blue color one is what we call the center one. That is really what we call the sector. In our case, we're talking about the seed sector, but that can also be the dairy sector. It can be a cocoa sector. It can be the maize sector. That's there. It's not. It has 9 boxes in it, but it is like that. Activities in that sector contribute to a specific sector outcome. If you go in the middle row, you move 1 box to the darker gray. These are seed sector outcomes. The next one, the light gray one, these are the food security outcomes. As we know, a sector is not isolated. There are other sectors, but there are also what you call socio-economic drivers. These can be political issues, these can be security, these can be employment, these can be about inclusion, many economic forces, for example, the current war that is happening that changes prices. All of these are socio-economic drivers to which a sector needs to respond, to which a food system needs to respond. So what does it mean if grain prices go up? What does it mean also for a seed sector? This create that sector is always dynamic. At the bottom you see the environmental drivers, and basically these are droughts. This can be all about the whole climate change. This is the need for building more resilience in sectors. And what is then in that context needed for a sector to respond? So keep this picture a little bit in mind. Let's go to the next slide. So in the next slide, I will present to you more what is inside this sector. We're talking about the seed sector today. What many used to do is call, if we talk about maize or about seed or dairy, we talk about the dairy or the seed value chain, which is a linear thinking where basically products move along different stakeholders, and every time it moves, there's a monetary transaction. We have been using for the last 20 years this approach. But what we realized that value chain approach does not capture many of the aspects which are vital for dairy or seed to work. We're talking about service provision. We talk about consumption. Stakeholders that are organized. If you think about the rice sector, many different stakeholders are organized. And also for a sector to function, we need to coordinate, regulate, and invest. All these aspects, so including governance and production, they come together. A sector is not only formal, it has often, and much of the food in your country is produced produced informally and also marketed informally. There's public, civil, private stakeholders. Even if you zoom in at the seed sector for cassava looks very different from maize or from cocoa. So you need to be pluralistic. Some is more formal, other are informal. One is more private, the other is more public. So one thing does not fit. Even in the seed sector, there's many different dimensions. But every time you need to realize that there are differences. And if you want to go for a seed sector contributing to the needs or responding to new events like the current crisis or previously with the COVID, we need to see, okay, what does this mean to the different, what you call the small blue boxes, to the different, how can we respond to that? What is relevant? With the COVID-19, we really try to capture these different aspects so we don't forget and make sure where are priorities for us to come to action. If you take this as a transformation process, where do we want to go as a country? And this is also the big thing in the room that we want to discuss. Where we need the Nigerian seed sector to go is we develop a vision that contributes to the country to reducing poverty, increasing food security, boosting agriculture economy, feed the people in the cities. There's a vision at the food systems level that translates for the seed sector. And that has direct implications on these different boxes in the blue one. Next slide. So the seed sector is just one, but the direction that we want to follow is that it contributes first to sector outcomes. So, for example, if you go to the center block in the dark gray, a portfolio of improved, well-performing, demanded varieties for all the crops. Because these varieties that, if grown in a better way, with good agronomic practices, will boost productivity. Farmers should use quality seed. That flow of availability of seeds should be stable. There cannot be shocks. Farmers should know where they can purchase the seed in a reliable way, and it should be there always. The access should be there. It should be affordable. And availability at the right time when farmers need it, at the right quality, it should be there. This is what the seed sector should aspire. How they do that, it should result in covering all crops, nutritious foods linked to healthy diets, feed, so also the animal production can be boosted, but also what kind of crops and foods can be used for farmers. Seed is just one of the inputs in there, but it plays an important role. Next one. So, as I said earlier, the seed sector contributing to seed sector outcomes and thereby to food and security and nutrition outcomes is not isolated. It also responds to socio-economic drivers, but also responds to food system outcomes that are more driven to the right top box, which is socio-economic outcomes. So if we think of inclusion, if we want smallholder farmers to play an important role in ensuring food security and that there are jobs in rural areas, this is an outcome we want to achieve that has direct implications on how we structure food production and how we structure also seed sector transformation. If you go to the right bottom, these are environmental outcomes. How do we produce? Are we using varieties that are climate smart so we can reduce the dependency on external inputs, or that respond in the right way to soil fertility or production system in certain areas? These outcomes we want to acquire, and the seed system is not the only one, but plays an important role in bringing the right varieties to farmers to make also the system more resilient and adaptive to changes in environmental conditions. So we position the seed sector in a much larger, and this framework helps us. This might all sound a bit theoretical to you. I must admit, I work at the university and I like also developing these frameworks, but I want to go now in the next steps to explain how different activities by others, sometimes by us, and sometimes by Sahel Consulting, can be placed within this framework. Let's start to explore some of these examples. Next slide, please. The first case, and I know it a little bit because when working at Gates Foundation, I was already exploring a lot. One of the tasks that I was given working in Seattle was really to say, there's a problem in what is called early generation seed in the world. How can we solve this? Let me explain to the non-seed and breeding people what is early generation seed. Much of the R&D for seed is taking place in big public institutions like IITA, international. National research stations are linking with them, and they develop varieties, the technology of new varieties. Big international companies also do that for certain crops, like Bayer would do for maize, and some Dutch companies would do for vegetables. Japanese or Chinese companies would do for rice. They have their R&D inside the company. But for most of the food crops in Nigeria, the development of these varieties is done in public institutions. How does that technology reach farmers? Through seed. And just out of IITA and through the National Agriculture, it doesn't directly reaches the farmers. The seed needs to be multiplied. So we take, depending on the type of seed, some can go fast, some not. You need to multiply it before you will have certified seed that goes to farmers. So what we see is that in the technology that is developed at research and the farmers that plant it to grow their crop, there are linkages, the seed value chain and earlier. And what we observed that there were many weak linkages between that. We have the varieties, but they don't reach the farmers. We have seed companies that want to produce the seed and get it to the farmers, but they couldn't get that seed quick enough or in the right quantities in a stable manner from all the others. So what happened, what we took, and that's where a new company is being established in Nigeria called Agri-Food Seed, that really comes with a commercial model between the public research and the seed companies that does that production of seed in the earlier stages. That's why we call it early generation seed. It's not the seed for the farmers, it's seed for the companies. And what is really wonderful in this model is that also companies and research are involved in this. And that the aim is to develop it really in a viable business, so that it's independent from public resources. Well, at the R&D, public resources are still required. So the challenge is this link. So what is the action here? We develop really, and that's what Agri-Food with its partners does, is to develop new a new principle and roll this out. To be really multi-stakeholder and work on those crops where there's a big demand, profitable model for that. It cannot do for all crops, but for those crops that are profitable, it can work. So what are the seed sector outcomes? We address this with link. We can make the missing piece in that link is put. We get a better and more secure supply of what we call basic first and then later certified seed for more varieties and more. Basically, if that certified seeds in a more steady flow reaches farmers, farmers' productivity will be raised. The profitability for the farmers will be raised. And if we get more farmers of more varieties to farmers and newer varieties reach farmers quickly, the adaptation to changes, whether it's market changes or climate changes, can be improved. Next slide. We stay in Nigeria. Not talking about grain crops, but talking about cassava. Very important to your country. Another project that I also know from my wait time when I was at Gates, and where also Sahel is playing a big role, working with IITA and other players in the development of quality varieties, improved varieties of cassava for both the food and the processing market. What was really the challenge is that there was not really a good model for developing new varieties. And to do this R&D, the development of varieties for cassava, takes a long time. So Cornell and IITA are really working how to accelerate with newest technologies, state of the art, to become much faster in developing the varieties. And then what is very critical here, and that's the role of basics, is that also once these varieties are there, they meet different demands. And cassava in your country has different markets. And the seed system is not one seed system, there are multiple seed systems that cater different farmers. So here the pluralism that I talked about comes into play. The breeding you can centralize, making sure that different demands are made. And if we do a faster, efficient breeding, we can cater for different demands. But then also the seed channel needs to be different for different types of farmers and different markets. And that is what the combination of these two programs do. And do it in a way that it is really sustainable, that it can pay itself back, especially at the seed distribution level. So what are outcomes for the seed sector? Basically, that we get quality seed of improved cassava varieties available to farmers and industrial processors, from which they can professionalize, increase their productivity, etc. What are the food system outcomes? Enhance food security for Kleur, but also nutrition, because farmers with a more profitable crop have more income, so they can invest in more nutritious food. More income for the farmers, more income for those involved in seed production. And again, the same story like with eco-basic seed. If more new varieties quickly can move in, the country will be better able to respond to changes in the climate and the demands in the market. Next one. So we travel across the continent to Uganda. Wageningen has been involved for more than 8 years in what is called the ISD Uganda project. It's a kind of sister project to the collaborative seed project there, but it's really shaped earlier. What is one of the things that in Uganda we have worked on is really working on quality assurance. So what we saw in Uganda, and some of the things might be very similar to Nigeria, is that to produce certified seed for a large number of, excluding maize, but all other crops, we saw that it was very difficult to ensure that all the seed going to farmers is certified. Few inspectors, seed producers, both formal and informal, are there. Increasingly, groups of farmers starting to produce seed for then farmers in their neighborhood. So the amount of seed basically that was certified was very small. This doesn't mean that there was no seed business and seed production. It was all out there. So what we did is working on more a pluralistic approach, different ways to develop quality assurance that caters for formal, intermediate, informal seed systems. So for example, if you had what we call local seed businesses, groups of farmers that produce bean seeds, it would be cowpea seed in yours, or cassava, like the ones in the basics. They developed a methodology which is called quality declared seed, where a lot of the quality control takes place locally with local players, but it doesn't have the full-fledged requirements for that. Also because the seed stays often in that same neighborhood. Farmers know from whom they buy seed. It's quality declared is also something that is really developed further by FAO. So what the project together with all the stakeholders did, we said, what is necessary? This is really a missing thing. The seeds produced in intermediary informal systems need to be also, farmers need some recognition, not full, but some recognition of a quality assurance. So they developed a second model of quality assurance called quality declared seed. And they developed regulations and practices over that. And now you see that for beans, cassava, pigeon peas, groundnut, all crops that are more in the informal sector, where seed supply does take place, there's now a way to do quality assurance. So what is the outcome for the seed sector? The quality of the seed in intermediary and informal seed systems is improved. Farmers have more trust in the partners from where they purchase their seeds. It means also that those producers and entrepreneurs working in that intermediary and more informals, they have more business, more jobs. And for example, lots of women in Uganda start to engage in seed business in this way. So farmers get better seed because the quality is better. There's more business, and in that way it contributes to food security and nutrition. Next slide, please. Now we come back to West Africa, going to some neighbors in Mali and Niger. Also in those two countries, at this moment, an ISD project is running. I'm directly involved in that. IFDC is working with Sasakawa for agriculture, Agri-Food, KIT, and we're our partners in this project. So one of the examples that I want to share with you, and I think it's also inspiring because we try to do something similar also more in the future in Nigeria, is to say, okay, we see that there is a weak link between international companies that for crops where not much public breeding take place, but they have globally operating sectors breeding that cover also varieties that suit to the settings of those countries. But they don't always, the business model of these international companies is that they work through local seed companies and local distributors. And those global companies have limited presence because they don't have yet their partners to bring their varieties to those countries. Some have, but we need to have competition. We need to foster the sector. So there is a link, missing link there. So what does ISD Sahel do? Is assess and enhance the capacity of local companies and distributors. So they reach the level of professionalization that an international company can link with them. And then once they reach that level, and we do that sometimes also with these private companies, we facilitate that linkage. And then basically business to business, the international vegetable potato companies, they will seek their partners and try to move forward. So that means also that their varieties will come available to the farmers in the country. And we have more competition, so farmers have more to choose from. So what is the seed sector outcome of this small assessment and business-to-business facilitation? Is that we have a professionalization and more business in the seed sector. And that seed sector is not isolated in the country, it's connected globally, even though it is still in an early stage of development, but you basically, we put fertilizers for the development of that sector to be a partner with the rest of the world, to really bring good genetics and business to the country, and that local partners make that business flourish. The business locally, so this farm, so that also the seeds coming from these companies can be used by farmers. This way, farmers get better access to globally available vegetable and potato varieties. What does that mean for food security? Of course, more vegetables can create, especially at nutrition level, more opportunities. But more importantly, it will create more income for farmers and employment. And if more varieties will come, that is going to be repetitive, more capacity to adapt to changes. Next one, please. Back to Nigeria. And I'm working on that in the collaborative seed program, and I saw Dr. Ibidun in the audience. We know when we did an assessment of the seed sector in Nigeria, which I'm about to talk about also, we identified that variety release is a major challenge. The duration of variety release, so to non-seed system people, once in public or in private sector, you develop the variety, you need to pass the stage of variety release. There are procedures and institutions involved in that to make sure that this variety meets the demand. And there's a whole list of criteria without going to the details. There's a procedure for allowing you and bringing this variety to the market. All countries have that procedure. But the situation in Nigeria was that the duration of this process is comparatively long compared to many other countries. That the cost is high and not clear. So a company or a public breeding institute, when they want to release a variety, they don't know exactly what the cost is. And even the cost may be different for a different type of players. So there's not an equal level playing field between the different players. So for somebody to invest in the development varieties and then you don't know what it takes to get there, and it takes long, and in other places it's shorter, this is not good for the seed sector in Nigeria. We had to tackle that, and the stakeholders identified this really as a top priority. So in the collaborative seed program with NAGREP and the National Committee, Wageningen, Sahel, and NARS and seed companies, we are working together to assess the current status and explore what are scenarios to address those challenges. Everybody's involved, everybody's at stake. So we really use multi-stakeholder dialogues to assess the problem and identify how can we solve this. And together we decided, and the committee endorsed that, and also the leadership of NAGREP really took hands in moving this forward. We identified 4 crops where we're gonna pilot the solutions, the different scenarios, how to address those. And then, not they will do that, but it's basically the stakeholders whose stake is there to make those reforms, to change that, to make it faster, more transparent, and also cheaper. So what you see, also what became clear out of the assessment, that the procedures were cumbersome. So you see that in banking and everywhere, digitalization comes up. So we also decided to foster really the digitalization of the processes and services in variety release. It will reduce the cost, it will reduce transaction, and it will increase accountability and transparency of the whole system. So what are seed sector outcomes? Actually, when you do that, you will get more applications for release of varieties. We'll get more and fair competition. more new varieties will become available because the cost to get varieties for this demand, for that state, for that ecosystem, it will be possible to get more genetics adapted to specific needs to farmers. And in the end, if this system is cheaper, faster, and more fair, we get more private sector investment, which in the end, more seed in the hands of farmers and more different types of seed in the hands of farmers. That is also at the food system outcome. A broader portfolio of varieties will be available, which will contribute again to food and nutrition security, more employment with more business opportunities, and also more varieties means increasing the resilience and adaptation of the food system of this. So this is an enabling business environment for seed sector investment, both public and private, where we really are working. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned, the variety release was really prioritized by stakeholders as a key something to work on. Ahead of the collaborative seed program, Sahel, NASC, CEDAM, East West Seed Company and Wageningen, together with Sahel, we were engaged really in a process in response from a collaboration between the Netherlands government and the Nigerian government to say, let's do a seed sector assessment. Where are we now? And where do we want to go? And what needs to be done to move forward? So what we then developed was what is called the National Seed Roadmap. What was the challenge? Basically, the challenge was that in the conversation at the federal ministry, said, do you have a strategy? Where do you want to go for the seed sector? That strategy was not there. Everybody talks about the seed sector, that it's complex, and many people were intervening in it, but it was not one plan. So what we did as a start of collaborative activities between Nigeria and the Netherlands, say, let's do a whole assessment and come to a plan. Nowadays we call such a plan a roadmap because that's how it goes. So from what we did, we identified for all the different crops with all the different type of formal, informal seed systems with different stakeholders, we identified the key challenges. A challenge is negative. We transform it in what is called ambition and made strategic pathways to achieve those ambitions, overcoming those challenges, and match those to aspirations of what the seed sector should look like and how the seed sector contributes to the food system. We engaged in dialogue, prioritization, and planning. And a roadmap is not something that we do for 20 years. Yeah, we do it for 20 years, but the environment in which we operate is very dynamic. So a roadmap needs to adapt also to the conditions. And we need to see how, if we change the variety release, if we have more private sector investment, what other, there will be trade-offs of that. And new challenges will emerge. So a dashboard and a roadmap will become a much more dynamic whole. That needs coordination and governance in the seed sector. At the same time, it will create alignment between all the investments by my previous employer, the Gates Foundation, what the Dutch do, what AGRA does, what organizations in humanitarian and private sector do. We need alignment in this so we don't contradict each other, so that we really move forward in a vision that the sector has defined for itself. So what are the outcomes of developing such a roadmap and working such a roadmap? That we really advance in transforming the sector. So it's more vibrant, it's inclusive for all the crops that needs to be covered, and it's also sustainable. And in that way, if that seed sector becomes more vibrant, in the end, what we want to achieve, and also what we in the CSP, in the Collaborative Seed Program want to achieve, is to really that it contributes to enhanced food security and nutrition. It contributes to increased employment, economic growth, and also contributes to resilience and adaptation. Next one. So then I want to go back to East Africa with my, I miss one. Yeah, so this one, because I know that also people from the investment community sit in this room, and I really want to bring how private sector can play a vital role in seed sector transformation also. This is something that we are working on, and I'm also part of that team from Wageningen in the Ethiopia-Netherlands Seed Partnership. So you see that there is a very similarity with the work that we have in Nigeria. The challenge in Ethiopia is that we really, because in Ethiopia is really a government-driven economy, it's a much more public presence than in your country. We have a weak capacity in the private sector and limited uptake of innovations and also limited empowerment of youngsters, of women in the seed sector. At the same time, we have a really constrained enabling environment for the private sector to move forward. So what are the actions we are engaging now in a component, in what we call the company partnerships within the Ethiopia-Netherlands Seed Partnerships? We foster PPPs between the program and 7 global Dutch seed companies. The investment per partnership is 300,000 euros. This is not small. This is big money. And the program invests half of it, and the private sector company the other half. What we do in each of the 7 partnerships, and there are different things because it depends on what crop, it depends on the type of company, but basically we organize demos, and the companies organize demos and training. They foster employment of young professionals in the sector. They empower women to take up the lead of their research facilities. The youngsters will become the trainers. So they really start to bring in the graduates and really local staff seeing opportunities there, including in the big companies, but also in their local partners, the distributors, the local seed are their partners. And at the same time, jointly, there are a number of issues. One of them is called variety release. So it's very similar. We are learning from Nigeria at this moment in Ethiopia. So together with these companies and also with Ethiopian companies, we are working on changes, how to do some regulatory, address certain problems in the regulatory frameworks. So what we want to achieve, and they put also some money for that on the table. So what for the seed sector are key outcomes is basically they start to really contribute to their own business. But it's not an isolated effort, because for those big companies, and big and smaller companies, they're not all the big ones, but some of them are smaller. They also take responsibility in fostering the seed sector to become more professional. So not only their own stake in it, of course they compete with each other, but they take also responsibility of advancing the whole sector in Ethiopia. Why? Because we talk Nigeria, Ethiopia, these are the 2 big countries for agricultural production in the continent. So they take not only their own share, but they also take on a public share, a pre-competitive share to foster the sector. And they put their resources for themselves, but also for that part. And in a way, for those companies, it becomes very visible, and it's good to see those tiles from the SDGs. For them, they can say, okay, come on, we really contribute to reducing food security, increasing food security, sorry. We talk about decent work and economic growth by being very explicit about youth and gender. They take up their share also. And of course, because the seed sector is always linked to climate action. So these are really their contribution, and these partnerships facilitate them to contribute to food system outcomes. Next slide, please. So after this journey, we are back with this framework. Just this final example from Ethiopia brings you that seed companies are not only concerned about marketing their produce, they need to produce it, they need to be really a value chain, they talk about services and regulation and coordination, they also invest in that piece. in order to make a contribution. The other example, let me take the Eco Basic seed. Of course, if you look at production, getting the R&D to farmers, that is part of production, but in order to function, stakeholders need to work together. There need to be the right services in place. There needs to be a business model developed. There needs to be investment. There needs to be coordination in order that the varieties, the seed of the variety, the early generation is produced so that farmers can move ahead. I can keep on talking about the different examples that we have given, but it's really how we can, this helps us, how the different aspects of sector activities contributed. And every time think, okay, what does it contribute to the crop and variety portfolio? What does it contribute to farmers actually invest in quality seed or making the move from OPV varieties to hybrid varieties? So really the seed use is increased, that the flow of varieties is stable, and the seed is also coming to the farmers. There's good seed access, and also when farmers need it, it is available, and they can trust the seed they buy. And in that way, the seed sector, through seed sector outcomes, can contribute to food security. Next slide. So let's move to lessons learned. So what we see is that developing a sector such as seed sector is not just a linear process. It's very dynamic and it's complex, and that complexity you need to work at different fronts. It will pull us out of the comfort zone of value chains because we need to be working always also about governance, other aspects that are not linear and that are not for one crop maybe this way and the other crop maybe that way. There are always multiple challenges, but that creates also multiple opportunities. But what is critical, and that is what we showed also, and that we are engaging in Nigeria with this roadmap, is that we really have a clear vision where the sector needs to go, and that also will evolve. But we want to be consistent and coherent in that strategy. And that solutions don't happen in isolation, that you have one project here and one project there. No, these projects, they interact, they are not isolated. And that's where what's as a roadmap and operating in different fronts, or everybody's aware what the others are doing, that is really critical for moving forward. And also that if there's better coordination in such a sector, it's more responsive and its capacity to adapt to new circumstances increases, like every time the crisis that we are facing. And also make sure that it does not only contribute to a better business environment and economic growth, but also concerns about food security and nutrition, but also socioeconomic outcomes and environmental outcomes. Because if we do not address those, food security and nutrition will not be achieved. Next slide, please. We talked a lot about the seed sector, but we realized that the seed sector is just one. We talk about cassava, the seed sector is then again part of the cassava sector. We talk about dairy, we talk about maize. If we talk about poultry, we talk about feed. So every sector has its own dynamic. It's different production systems, like we talked about cassava. But what is critical also when we make decisions, like even if we make decisions where to invest, where are opportunities to invest, to say, okay, within the food system, what sectors we can make a difference, what we can do. And now I talk as Wageningen, where we can do something and contribute to the challenges of agriculture in Nigeria. We have certain expertise, and together with our Nigerian partners, we have identified those sectors where we can make a difference, like in seed, like in horticulture. But we do it also that we take those sectors, if we choose a sector, and if Sahel chooses a sector or an investor chooses a sector to work on, you always realize that you have these socioeconomic and environmental drivers that you need to respond to in the way the sector evolves. To make it more inclusive, to care about youth and employment. And if you care about youth and employment, you may take different choices if you only would take food security in towns. So these are these different trade-offs that you need to take into account. At the same time, we need to deal with environmental drivers to respond to that and to also be prepared how to respond to that. In the end, what we want to achieve with sectors or the seed sector within this food system is to achieve those food system outcomes, the right part of the figure. So what becomes then transformation? For me, in this context, transformation is that's the process by which, in our case, the seed sector contributes to food system and socioeconomic and environmental outcomes. So if we do a good job there, and we have work, of course, with indicators also in the collaborative seed program, which are at the food system level, if we do a good job, we change some of those indicators in the direction that we are up for. Next slide. Let's talk about the investments in the seed sector and food system. There are lots of people in this room who know also with me and agree with me that we are Nigeria dealing with a very high yield gap. If you travel around the country and you know, or you're a scientist or a business person also, you know that what the yield, the productivity at the moment is in any of the sectors, agricultural sectors, and what can be achieved. Not from at the research station high, but is really attainable with good practices, good inputs, good management. The yield gap is tremendous. So at the same time, we know that because of demography and economic growth, your country, the demand for agriculture and food is very, very high. This potential, if you travel in areas of the country, you see the bare land, you see the potential that it has there. There's a tremendous potential. That is a situation that I see in your country, and I guess many of you will agree with me. That is basically the development of the agricultural sector in your country. There's a huge demand, and there's a huge potential. Of course, if we then zoom in at the seed sector, it's just one of those sectors that needs to contribute to Nigeria's agricultural production and growth. So really, that is also part of the transformation process, is to really play its role to boost up productivity. In doing so, we need investments, public and private. And those investments, as best as possible, can be done in PPPs, sometimes only private or private to private, in some cases, like we explained, public-private, to really target at those SDGs. There's no one single approach. What you do in cowpea, what you do in tomato, what you do in cassava or in maize, for sectors or for seed sector is not the same one. There's no one bullet to do that. You need to come with a coherent way forward. If this potential is there, why doesn't it happen? There's so many opportunities, both domestic, Nigeria, there's no place where I find more entrepreneurial people in the world. That's a great asset you have. But also in the region, you're really a potential powerhouse in agriculture. So your companies don't only invest for their own market, but also for the region. And also globally, I know for the seed sector, everybody's watching what is happening in Nigeria, because they have something to contribute and want to do business with partners in your country to contribute. They see this potential and that demand, but still they are very reluctant to do so. They know, big companies, that it takes a long time to go. They are talking about a horizon of investments of 20 years to move forward. Critical in that is really where you have to look what is hampering that? And what I know that moving forward is all about a business environment, enabling environment for investments, both public and private in a sector, to really match that, move that potential forward. I think looking at the world at this moment, an interesting story is to look, for example, at India, what they have done. More and more, India is reaching food security for most of the crops, but sometimes they really care about their own sector, and they take very protectionist measures. But in some cases, they really invite global players to invest. Many of the seed companies nowadays have their research facilities for dryland agriculture in India. So India benefits. But at the same time, for some other crops, the government is very protective because they have good public research institutes who can do the job. So it's really a mix of what crop, where there is public, local investment, where they depend on global investments to really move forward in developing the sector. So it is that kind of smart mix to move forward. I think that way I want to close this presentation. So I'm really looking forward to the questions that you may have. It's getting a little bit dark here, but so it's moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Walter. Yeah, very beautiful presentation. I think I like the way you break it down, the seed sector and the relationship with the food system, and the different examples, which really shows real life what is being done to improve the seed sector and how this contributes to the food system. Yes, I think we just have very limited time in terms of questions and answer. I wouldn't waste so much time to go over what you've already done a very great job of explaining. I think is very clear, and the recording will be available to everyone, all participants, to go back and play back if there are areas they didn't capture or they were not so clear. And we are always available to further response to you. Feel free to reach out to us at Sahel Consulting in case you have any further questions. So for the questions on this presentation, I think when preparing for this session, Walter, I had reached out to a couple of people I know in the industry who have very clear understanding of how the system and the food system work. And I received some good questions I wanted to ask you. So the first question I would like to ask is from Perpetua Nkechi. She is the gender rights advocate and training lead of the Potato Farmers Association of Nigeria. She sent me this question regarding potato, obviously. So she says, considering the importance of potato to global food security and nutrition, what needs to be done to see more investment in the potato sector development and the potato seed industry multiplication technologies in Nigeria? I think that was, that's a question there.
Yeah, so I think we should see, like I did mention earlier, maize and other sectors, we really have to look at what is the state of the potato sector in Nigeria. And we know that Plateau State, in its potential, is the largest and the highest potential potato growing area of Africa. Much bigger than the potatoes that you find in the highlands or in the hills in East Africa. And in the time when we were doing the conducting the seed sector assessment for the national roadmap, very known scientist from the Netherlands called Peter Gildemacher also did an assessment of the potato sector, a quick assessment, and he really found that in many aspects of marketing, also given the entrepreneurship that is always there in Nigeria, there are not many bottlenecks. But really in the enabling environment for businesses to develop the seed sector, there are many constraints. We're not talking about importation only, we're talking about microgrowers. We see now that there is hybrid true potato seed. But really to make a change, the seed sector in potato needs to be really structured and advanced. There is a need for enabling environment. There is a need for investment in that sector, in the capacities, bringing making use of locally available genetics, but also bringing in globally available genetics in different forms. The industry is really changing at the moment dramatically. I don't want to go into details because it's getting very technical, but I really see that there's a major opportunity to really invest in also using a pluralistic approach in that. Critical for food security for sure, but also important in diversifying the diet and also the income of lots of people involved in the potato sector, because it's a big laborious crop, and for many smallholder farmers and many traders and industries, it's a critical potential sector. So she's right that it needs to be done, but then you need to do not one single approach. You really have to take a clear vision how to develop it, address the enabling environment as well as the capacities, and work with different models. That's my answer.
Okay, thanks, Walter. I think maybe that can draw a similar parallel from your response to what we did in the seed sector, having like a very clear roadmap which shows where the sector needs to go, where the challenges are, then transforming these challenges to ambition. And I think maybe some work needs to be done in that area.
Yeah, and also some of the aspects really Nigeria is very strong and need no sort of support, just an enabling. But in other aspects, it needs to connect its potato sector to the global industry, and that is at this moment not happening. So and also because the capacities at the local level and in the business environment is preventing that to happen.
Okay, so now Walter, now you mentioned the global part. So I have this question. I had, increasingly we are seeing, COVID happened, which you started in your presentation, and the response of most countries was tending towards protectionism, right? We see COVID, the lockdowns were very quick. We saw now the Russia-Ukraine conflict. You see also India recently is trying to ban export of wheat at the moment where we need more wheat export from them to cover the shocks from this crisis. So this picture then is, we are seeing this isolationism, right? But this is the time where we need more collaboration, more openness. And how do countries, the poorer countries who are usually most affected when people or when these disruptions happen, how do these poorer countries like Nigeria protect our own players to ensure that we are not so much affected, or we don't lose out when these bigger countries make this decision to just shut the shop and break the supply chain?
So I think we can learn, and I think we need to, and I think Ndidi and others in the room can go back to 2008. When we had the global food crisis. That was also a time when many countries closed their borders. And if you see what changed in Nigeria, for example, with rice, a lot has changed since that time. So I really see that the protectionism will always happen. And India, at this moment, can afford to close its borders. So that also say, if we really want and we know that in potential, Nigeria is an exporting agricultural nation. That amount of land for many of the crops, not for wheat, but for many of the other crops, you are in a position to really boost productivity and feed your own population and basically be the grain store for your region. So for me, the only way to mitigate this is to really invest in a structural agriculture production in your country, so you are able to respond. So you can close your borders. It doesn't help you at this moment, but what you saw in 2008 happen, many were doing that. At the same time, protectionism doesn't mean protectionism for everything. It means protectionism at certain moments. It doesn't mean that even this happens, that they close borders for something, which I mentioned earlier. You see India, there are now multinational seed companies coming from India. International seed companies are investing in India because they put up their research. So it's an enabling environment for different players to be there. But and that is what also Nigeria does, to be very concerned about your food security, but don't do it only responding now, but have this long-term vision to say, okay, we need to get our investment in grains and other sectors on long-term right, so we are able to respond to such events as it now. And the polarization and the multipolar development of the world at this moment, of which the war is an example, fosters, in Europe, we're doing the same. We're pulling things again to us. But we still negotiate and have trade with everybody. And I think really, Nigeria has the potential to take such paths also. But that's a long-term perspective. Open, but open in a way. That's more, we're talking about trade and food policies here.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Walter. Then the final question I want to ask for now, I think time can permit, is a question from Professor Chiedozie Egesi. So I read directly his question. He said, nutrition is a key part of food ecosystem. However, focus is usually on food availability. That's what most people focus on, right? With nutrition coming as an afterthought. This needs to change in breeding programs by demanding that better nutrition content becomes part of the breeding metrics for especially staple crops in the country. How do you think we can implement this, or what advice for improving the system for crop variety release to capture this need to have nutrition embedded and not just focus on simply the content?
In my presentation, I usually am pretty consistent in saying food security and nutrition. So that is exactly what he says. So I know at the practice for breeders, yield is a big piece. It's a big piece. But more and more, that also when a certain agricultural productivity in countries start to reach a limit, also other traits, such as nutritional value of varieties, become more and more important. So that really needs to be fostered, and there are really global public major investments are made in this space, because nutrition is really crucial moving forward. But one thing I really want to say about also the part of variety release, and that is also when in variety release, very specific traits can be recognized. If they really are different from others, then the variety release, in my view, but I'm sure in the audience there are some knowledgeable people that really say, okay, variety release does, if a certain trait is there on vitamin A or iron or whatever, maybe the yield is lower and some other characteristics are not that good, but if it really stands that out, variety release should not be a disincentive for this. But of course, it is in the end those who invest in breeding, and if this is public, it's public reason. If it is private, it's also affordability that can get a return to their investment. So, but for let's say grain crops or legumes, to have this kind of nutritional traits, then it's also very much depending on the donors and the finances of such programs.
Okay, thank you very much, Walter. I think that's as much time we could take. So I'll check with my colleague. Do we have questions from the participants?
Okay, thank you, Chinedu. As at now, there are no questions, so yeah, I guess we can move on.
Okay, thanks, Uyai. So I hand over back to Antonia for the closing remarks. Thank you so much, Walter. It was a pleasure always.
Very a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much for participating in the Sahel Knowledge Series webinar. This is the first of its kind. And like Ndidi had mentioned, we are happy that you are all a part of this. This is a call for urgency for people to collaborate with Sahel in transforming Africa's agriculture and nutrition landscape. We'd like to say a big thank you to Walter for taking time out of your busy schedule to facilitate this webinar. We're grateful for all the pioneering work you do in Nigeria and Africa through the Collaborative Seed Program and other seed projects which aim to transform the seed sector. To the committee that has worked so hard to put this out, I say well done and thank you. During this webinar, Walter has made us clearly understand the link between seed sector and the food system, and that without, we cannot transform the food sector fully without having a strong seed sector support. I hope that as we leave this webinar, our mindsets have been challenged and we are motivated to do our part in establishing a good seed sector and the journey, of course, towards a sustainable food system. Thank you all and see you at the next session in the coming quarter where we'll be exploring the dairy sector. And for those questions that we could not get to, we will follow up via email to address them. This webinar would also be available on the Sahel website for viewing. You can also visit any of our social media platforms, as the team has already put that out in the chat box for more information. Thank you and see you all in August.